Joining me now is journalist and filmmaker Ami Horowitz. Ami, the polling is clear on the deportation issue. A clear majority of Americans support it, despite the media meltdown. And talking about media meltdowns, the characterisation of this violent, gangbanging illegal immigrant as some sort of innocent Maryland dad who was wrongly deported to El Salvador, that is just not translating with the American people. They are not buying it. And yet the Democrats continue to support this dude. You've got a number of them planning to travel to El Salvador to advocate on his behalf. Senator Chris Van Hollen has already been there. And it was a fruitless media stunt, Army, one taxpayers funded.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip.
I don't know what they're thinking, Army, because when it comes to this issue, Donald Trump is on solid ground. The majority of Americans want to see this deportation program continue. They want to see every single illegal immigrant deported.
Yeah, it's a majority for sure on illegal immigrants, but it's a super majority on illegal immigrants who have a criminal past, right? It's 70-30, maybe even 80-20, depending on the polls you're looking at. Yeah, you're right. The media is such a fascinating part of this because they keep using the same language, right? Maryland family man, right? First of all, saying that he's from Maryland as if he is a citizen of Maryland, right? Born and raised there. They're pushing that narrative. Look, the media and more importantly, the politicians, the Democrats, have fallen into a trap that Trump has set up for them, okay? They are lining behind a guy like Mahmoud Khalil, right? A man who supports terror, who supports the killing of Jews in the destruction state of Israel. And the Democrats lined up behind this guy. And now they're lining up behind Abraham Garcia, who is not a sympathetic character, right? And you've got Van Hollen, the guy you just showed there, with a photo op, sitting and talking with a man who is allegedly, and by court evidence, an MS-13 gang member, and also by court evidence in his own wife's complaint, beat his own wife. This is a massive trap that they're walking into. The polling numbers are very clear, like we said on this thing. Look, the only thing that could derail this is that if Trump makes a mistake and ends up deporting somebody who is a sympathetic character, it's possible, and that could turn it around. So he's got to be careful. But so far, the path that he's following is an interesting one, and the Democrats are walking right into it.
And I think if that did happen, and when you've got a mass program, that mistakes can happen, then you rectify it. I can't imagine the administration having someone deported wrongly wouldn't do something to address that. But in this particular case, it is just so clear-cut. So for the Democrats and the media to become so preoccupied with this single case, really, it's bizarre. Now, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, was in DC for meetings with the president, and it's clear that there is a great deal of warmth between these two leaders.
The goal for me is to make the West great again. Okay? And I think we can do it together.
We can.
And given that relationship, Meloni is ideally placed to kickstart tariff negotiations, not just for Italy, but perhaps for the EU.
My goal would be invite President Trump to pay an official visit to Italy and understand if there's a possibility when he comes to organize also such a meeting with Europe. Together we are stronger. And I have to find a way, I'm here to find the best way to make us both stronger on the two shores of the Atlantic.
We're going to have very little problem making a deal with Europe or anybody else, because we have something that everybody wants.
Ami, what is the status of the tariff negotiations? We're hearing more than 70 countries are lining up to renegotiate their arrangements with the US.
Yeah, look, likely there's going to be a number of interim agreements set up by the Trump administration. And no question, he could spin this as a win. And in a lot of ways, it will be a win, right? Look, I said this from the beginning. I said it over and over again on your show and other places. If this idea of a tariff war is a tactic in order to bring people to the table I am here for it. And there seems to be a lot of movement. Dozens of countries, in fact, are having these negotiations. I think that's great. Problem is that these things take time, right? The Peterson Institute said that the average free trade agreement takes 18 months. Look, the USMCA, right, NAFTA 2, which was negotiated by Trump himself, took over 12 months. And that's a long time when the economy is in flux, when the stock market is there's a lot of uncertainty and overhang. Nobody knows which direction the stock market's going to go in. And when the majority of people think prices will go up. Look, the polling that is coming out of this is not good for President Trump, that the majority of Americans think this tariff war will affect them personally in a negative way. And most importantly, look, Trump won on the economy, right? That's the one thing you got to really take care of, prices and the economy. And right now, the numbers came out recently in a poll, and he is underwater. He's down by 55% on how people are handling the economy. So, look, it all comes down to timing. If he can get these things striking one after another quickly, I think this can turn into a significant win instead of what it looked like, which was an own goal. But the problem is just, does he have enough time before we have the next election cycle for the House and the Senate? Because if he doesn't get it done by that time, he's going to put the House and Senate at risk.
Yes, you've made some excellent points there, but this is what he took to the election campaign, and no one would have thought it would come without pain, short-term, even perhaps medium-term pain. And when you're looking at major economic reforms, this is part of the deal. I don't know. I know overall this is unpopular, the tariffs, because people can feel prices increasing and they fear inflation is going to get worse. But amongst Trump's voters, it actually is thus far still popular. So we'll see how that progresses. Now, meanwhile, the Democrats have a leadership crisis. Bernie Sanders and AOC are emerging as the leaders of the party. These two far-left socialists are holding events across the country, Army, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has raised $9.6 million during the first quarter of the year. That is a significant amount. And Army, she's been spoken about as the leader of the Democrats, not just by leftists like Don Lemon, but also Republicans. Let's hear from Senator John Kennedy from the great state of Louisiana.
What do you think of the new leadership, Jasmine, AOC, and Bernie?
I consider Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to be the leader of the Democratic Party. She's entitled to her opinion. I'm entitled to mine. As I've said about her before, I think she's the reason there are directions on a shampoo bottle.
That's a bit harsh. But she certainly is raising enormous sums of money, Army, and seeming like the leader. You've got these two radicals who are setting the agenda for the Democrats.
Yeah, she's raised a ton of money, and alarmingly for the Democrats, 64% of that money is from first-time donors. So she's getting the base excited about her. She's not just raising money; she is essentially the leader. They're doing polling on this. We've talked about it. She's the leader in the polls. I mean, technically, right now, Kamala Harris is still the leader in the poll, but that's really more of an aftershock of the election because she led the party. But right after her is AOC, and by the way, number 2 behind her, number 3, Pete Buttigieg is way behind her. Gavin Newsom is in single digits. This should worry the Democrats if they want to win the next election, right? We just had an election. The country shifted rightward, and they are pulling against the tide. Look, we know that the Democrats have had this moment where they've got to figure out who are we, right? The election was such a shock to their system. They had to internally figure out who they are. Well, look, you can't say that the Democrats are held hostage by the left. The Democrats are the left. These polling, and if she leads their party, it proves it, okay? That's the problem, is that they like her policies. They like what she stands for. And she's starting to do some interesting things. She's moving away from some social issues and into economic populism. And let's not forget, look, in 2020, Bernie Sanders, do we forget this? Bernie Sanders was leading this race by a lot. He won Iowa. He won New Hampshire. He won Nevada. The only reason why the tide turned toward Joe Biden is because Congressman Jim Clyburn, at the last minute, said in South Carolina, said, you know what, I'm going to support him. Didn't before, but at the end was like, Bernie's a little too far. He shifted his support to Biden, which moved the black vote in South Carolina, which is one of the largest, if not the largest demographic and electorate within the Democratic Party. And he won that, and then that cascaded into a win. But prior to South Carolina, it looked inevitable that Comrade Bernie, who vacationed with his wife, or I think his honeymoon, in the Soviet Union, was going to become the Democratic nominee. Let's not forget that.
No, let's not forget also that this proud socialist has 3 properties, as all good socialists do. Now, Army, after weeks of feuding between the Trump administration and Maine's Democratic Governor Janet Mills, well, the Trump administration has had enough. They are suing Maine's education department for not complying with the ban on male bodies in girls' sports. I'm going to play here a video from XXXY Athletics, which shows just in the sport of high jump, just in that one sport, an Olympic sport, the top-ranked athletes in California, in Oregon, and in Connecticut in the girls' division are all boys, all athletes that were born male. Now, you personally took to the streets to discover how the radical left thinks about this policy, and it seems like pretty much every second person in Manhattan is from the radical left. This is frightening.
You're a trans woman, you should be able to compete because in your heart you are a woman and that's who you truly are rather than who you want to be. And I feel like it would be just, there's a word for it, not right.
I think they're women, so they shouldn't be allowed to compete against women. I don't think there's like any reason that should, like, it's not like you have like some advantage or disadvantage. Yeah.
Is it maybe transphobic to say biological men or biological women?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Those people are, they've been failed by the modern education system. I mean, how can they think that men don't have a physical advantage when it comes to sport?
No, they at the end of that video, I asked them, is there a physical difference between men and women? And they said no, it's all socialized, it's all social, cultural, that have made men more successful. Look, this is another 80-20 issue that they simply cannot get on the right side for. Look, they spent 4 years, more than 4 years, putting and supporting men in women's sports. They can't just change that. And the truth is, Rita, they don't want to change it. This is something they truly, truly believe in, and they're going to lay down on the tracks as the train runs over them because they have such a deep ideological belief that there's no difference between men and women. Sorry.
Oh, Army, what a bizarre and stupid hill to die on. Army Horowitz, thanks for your time tonight.